So I'll just go ahead and start it off. So welcome, Boss to Boss podcast. We have our guest, Marcus Norman of Norman Design Company. He's a graphic designer and a brand identity expert. And some of his past clients include Mercedes-Benz, Coors, McDonald's, Allstate, Motorola, and more. Miro's out today. As you can see, this is a little bit different. We don't usually do it this way. But he's out in Florida handling a job with Hodgepodge. So we're going to do something a little bit different. Marcus is the winner of the logo design contest that we had. As you can see on this video, you'll see that we have that new logo, and we are so happy to have you participate in the contest. So congratulations and thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. By the way, the logo looks awesome in the list of podcasts that I listen to. So I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. I hope traction for you. So.
Oh, we love it. We love it. And we're getting great feedback. So, we couldn't be happier to have you on.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Absolutely. So, we'll just dive in. This is a different format. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about branding and marketing. When you start a business, when you're coming from, the world of, working for somebody else, you don't really consider all these different things that go into actually starting the business. Maybe you have a skill that you're really pumped to bring to the world, but how do you bring it to the world? What are the things that you have to do step by step to make your dream become reality? So we have Marcus here. Just to give you a little bit of insight here, he uses a general three-step approach to kind of give you the results that you're looking for. So it's gather, simplify, and amplify. Can you elaborate a little bit about that process and what that really means?
Yeah, it needs elaboration because that's a really great simplification of essentially what we're trying to do. Whenever I get involved in a project and building an image or a brand for whether it's a small company, larger company, extending, starting, building, or creating, there's always a part of the process that involves gathering information. So if you're talking about the 3 steps, that'd be the first one. So from a strategic perspective, we need to understand things like who's your audience, who's your target market, how are you going to reach them? Some of those questions, or I should say the answers to those questions, are going to inform really what tactics you use, as well as visually how you're going to represent the image that you want to share or impart.
Right.
And then the second part, after the information is sort of gathered in terms of, like I said, your target, as well as any identity, personality words that you can kind of conjure up, and we can talk more about that because that's that middle step is a big one, because that's where all the creative how do I have it? Gather, simplify, and then amplify.
Amplify, yeah.
Is basically synthesizing all the background information so that the creative process can happen. And then ultimately, after that leaves, say, our office, from the creative side of things, we're going to start extending it and applying it to different tactics that are then going to go out and live in the world.
Right.
That's when we want to make sure whatever that chrysalis of visual, verbal, tone, feeling that we created is going to represent in the best light as effectively as it can when it gets amplified into the world. And then there's an iterative part of it too, particularly when you're talking about digital products, obviously, where there's a feedback loop. So if it goes out into the world, if it is amplified like that, there's tweaks that happen. And sometimes things roll back into that sort of simplification process, so we can more clearly articulate, get to the kernel of the truth, get to what's really meaningful, and weed out the things that aren't necessarily critical.
Doesn't get blocked out by all the other little thoughts and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Drilling down and simplification.
And that's a hard process because it's not just, I said it's like my expertise, our office, whatever, but the client that I'm partnering with obviously has to be a big part of that as well, because it's driven by ultimately their business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing. I mean, you could be the greatest marketer in the world, but if you don't have, I mean, and I do some similar things. If you don't have that communication with the client, and the client doesn't really have a vision, or some sort of goal that you can kind of run with, it makes these things very difficult.
Yeah.
And it definitely, I follow a similar process. I mean, a lot of times the hardest part is gathering, because
Yeah.
you don't have that communication, or maybe somebody just really hasn't really thought about it at all. So what I find, and tell me if you come across this, but when you get a new customer, maybe they drag their feet and they don't get you, maybe they don't have that really any idea at all, but they drag their feet and they don't really give you anything, but they just want you to come up with something. Have you dealt with that? Have you dealt with like smaller businesses like that don't really know what they want?
Oh yeah. It's it can be very frustrating. I know. There's a big part of what I do as a design professional, which is educating clients, because there are many of them. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday who really doesn't have an understanding, and this is not because he's not a bright guy. He's just never really been faced with a marketing question,
Right.
or let alone a strategic marketing question. So when he has no clue in what to tell me and what direction to give me,
Right.
then I have to educate him a little bit on the process. And then while I'm doing that, I can seed a couple of questions for him.
Sure.
Which not only do I explain to him what the process is, but then I give him almost an exercise to take home, because it's a question that he can't, I mean, he could answer right then and there when I pose it to him,
Right.
but they're not that type of question. They're more like thoughtful, thought-provoking questions that they're best served if he takes them back and thinks about them for a day or two,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even talks to some of his other coworkers if he's got a team involved,
Right.
To kind of figure out what the answers are. And by doing that, he's sort of internalizing a little bit of what I need him to do, which is kind of think strategically about his marketing. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that education process is very important. So, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and elaborate a little bit. We had this conversation beforehand, before we, was, a few weeks back, what we're going to do with Miro and everything. I wanted to be educated on you. So, about you. So I can imagine it's probably the same process, because, when you're finding somebody that you want to trust, to bring you the results or whatever, design something for you, it's hard to communicate with somebody when you guys aren't speaking the same language, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I find a lot of times is, if you kind of just ask the right questions, it's not necessarily about talking, it's about listening. Do you find that to be the most,
well, ultimately, that gathering portion of the process, the beginning, the early portion is 90% listening.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is the only time I should be talking is if I need to get more, say they haven't covered something that needs to be covered when they're sharing what they need to share with me about their company, or their plans, their strategy, their business objectives, etc. Or if they just don't have an awareness as to what they need to share with me.
Right.
And that's where that education has to kind of kick in. And that's an early, that's pre sort of, if you're going to use that 3 steps, that would be at the beginning of that process, really, is like, give that person a general understanding as to what the process is for the design process, but how that fits into marketing, because marketing is a really big umbrella.
Of course, yeah.
And branding and design is just one portion of that, but it's the one that I've got all my experience in.
Yeah.
So the reality is, getting back to it, it's the education has to happen early.
So okay, so let me ask you. Let me ask you. So when you say education, generally, when you encounter one of these types of clients that really doesn't have that understanding, and you are educating them, what are some of the things that you're kind of going over with the customer? What are some of the points that you always need to make sure that you address?
Right. So generally speaking, the issues are going to come in when somebody, like a website is a really good example, where somebody might have an impression, and this is easy to understand, that I'm going to hire a developer to create a website for me.
Mm-hmm.
That seems really simple, but the reality is you're building an image, right? You're putting a face publicly out in the world
Mm-hmm.
that's going to represent your company. And now you're hiring a developer who's got oodles of experience coding and knows PHP and blah blah blah. Well, they don't know much about putting a visual and a tone together, a brand identity together for anybody. So they will know the latest technology in terms of making a website functional and interesting, but not necessarily the best imagery.
Right.
So that's where I have to sort of say, there's more to the process than just asking a developer to come up with the architecture and the look and feel and then code it. That's just not the best practices in terms of creating an effective website. Now you can buy off the shelf templates and go ahead, plug in your menu, whatever your pages, fine. Obviously an economical way to go. Is it going to give you something distinctive and different and differentiate from your competitors? Probably not, because 9 times out of 10, your competitors, at least the smaller people who don't have the budget and the resources, that's what they're going to do.
Right. Yeah. Just a little fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing the same thing, so nobody stands out. And I think that, I mean, coming from probably, I mean, with what I do, and we do web design and web development.
Yeah.
So
you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know. It resonates 100% with me. And, you are, you're the type of person that handles what you do before and hands it off to us in a perfect, in a perfect world. And, for people that, are starting something new and they don't know where to start, obviously it's important to have a website, but if you have a website that's scattered and it's not really, conveying the things that need to be conveyed to the customer, then it almost is a waste of money if they don't go to somebody like you first to really get their vision formed fully. So for those people that are starting a business, what would you say is the most important step to take before you start developing a website, for instance?
Right. Because, I mean, you're talking about what visuals, what kind of tone do you want to build? What kind of feeling do you want to represent with your visuals when you have to start pulling those together for public facing? And whether it's a website or a truck sign, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
You still have these same considerations, and they are, okay, if I'm going to represent the identity for my company, which essentially is your brand, you need to think through thoroughly and honestly what that brand represents, how it might be represented. And one of the ways, and you and I had talked about this, was when you think about building a personality for a brand, which can inform the video or the imagery and the identity going forward. But a really, really simple, sounds simple. It is very easy, but it involves some thinking, is to think about your personality in terms of a collection of words. So 5 words is a really good kind of medium point, 4 to 6, whatever.
Sure.
Personality attributes that could represent your company. Now, they should be a little bit forward focused, not in terms of, don't think about them in terms of where you are today necessarily. Obviously, there's going to be some element of grounding that needs to happen.
But where you want to be.
If you plan on growing, then you should consider the future. Mm-hmm. And a way to think about these personality words that I find really helpful is to share with clients that you all know certain, whether it's a car brand or a personality in Hollywood, you can align with one So, for example, Tom Hanks is one that I always think about because he's very approachable. He's very friendly. He's smart. He's kind of no bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's somebody who you can clearly understand his personality and describe it with some simple words. And so if you can do the same for your company, now sometimes, like I said, you can use a known entity and literally co-opt those words for your own, because Apple also has a whole selection of words that you could say, yeah, I'm Apple. I'm the expert. I'm simple. I'm intuitive. I know what I'm doing. I'm the leader.
Yeah. Right.
So you can use those to kind of build it. But then once you have those 5 words, then you can use those as a lens or a filter to make sure all the visuals and language that you use going forward represent that. If I say, for example, being a leader is a personality of my company,
mm-hmm.
then I want to make sure none of my language, none of my visuals do anything that connote that. Excuse me. So there's not going to be anything wishy-washy. Questions are going to have to be answered really clearly and succinctly. And then obviously you just need to take a bold step forward with everything you do.
Yeah. You know, that's, I mean, and that's why it's important to talk with somebody that really has a handle on this type of thing. You know, it's refreshing to hear that, because I mean, even in this business, and I'm in, you know, a similar part, just a different little offshoot of the same thing.
Right.
And, you know, I hear clients' needs, you know, I hear, you know, questions, and, you know, people are kind of just lost and they're not sure. But when you put it in the terms of, like you said, think of a person that represents what you represent, you know, or want to become, you know, down the road. You know, don't think about for today necessarily, which is very wise words. Think about tomorrow. You know, I really love that, and I think that's really, really helpful. Yeah. You know, and if you can put that kind of process into their head, you'll get the greatest feedback. I would imagine. So that's really great stuff, and I love that.
I think one of the keys to what you were just saying, to kind of filter off that a little bit.
Yeah.
When the business owner gets involved in coming up with their personality words, you get something that's much more authentic. Because honestly, this is ridiculous. What has to happen is there has to be more than a kernel of truth to any personality words that you're going to come up with.
Sure.
I could come up with words for my company that are like, I'm fanciful, I'm dream whatever escape. Well, that's not me at all, and I could never sell that.
Yeah.
So any words you come up with have to be accurate and believable and portrayable ultimately, because your consumers, your target, is going to see through it in a minute if there's if you're the way you behave and the way you're communicating doesn't match up to the actions that they're experiencing.
And sincerity is key. I'm sure you agree, right?
Without question.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the same thing. And, you know, and that's the thing, you know, finding sometimes I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that a lot of times people get caught up in the marketing buzz. I know when we talk, there's certain words you're like, you know, let's stay away from that word. And I think it boils down to the fact that people hear all these buzzwords and things like that. So they think that that's the right way to do it, as opposed to just being completely sincere and real. And I think the best examples of sincerity in marketing would be an Apple or, you know, a Ford or a Chevy or something like that. You know, I mean, those type of, you know, key brands, you know, the big names where, you know, it's not necessarily talking about the product, it's talking about the experience and the feeling. I think that is really, really helpful to kind of differentiate. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty safe to say, guys, if you're watching this, that you know, Marcus understands the branding, and you know, he has the skill set to really bring this to the next level. And what we have is a special offering that we want to give to all of the listeners, and we'll cover that in just a minute. But I wanted to move on a little bit here and ask you a few different little questions. So business fundamentals, okay? We touched on the personality, okay? But there's a couple other things that we talked about before that were pretty important, and I'd like you to share that with the audience if you can. It wasn't just the fundamentals of, personality, but once you find the personality and you have that nailed down, the next step that we talked about was the target audience. And finding out how you're going to really, get it to resonate with the people that you're looking to resonate with. Can you elaborate a little bit on the target audience and how you come across that and work that out?
Yeah, I guess it's not really a linear step in terms of do your personality, develop your target. I think you need to consider your target while you're creating your personality words.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
If you're targeting kids, obviously, if you're then saying, "Oh, we're leaders," that's going to represent itself differently than if you're going after an adult market.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of understanding your target, I mean, that's critical because, I mean, you can understand yourself and come up with these personality words, but you have to do it in relation to the context of what you're trying to achieve, which is sell something, a service or a product, to a certain group of individuals. So you have to do the work to identify who those people are. And it's really easy to say, I've got a broad age range. It doesn't go for any, it's unisex. It goes across male and female, from buying age from 19 to 75. Well, that's
right.
That's a body of, that's everybody. When you think target, you're not necessarily saying, I'm only ever going to sell to, say, 25 to 38-year-old women, which would be a target. Now, you're still going to have sales outside that age group and sex, probably.
Yeah.
But you're saying, I need a sweet spot to market to. So now if I had that target, then I would know, it would inform to a degree, you can imagine, what imagery I would use in my brand. There's not going to be any monster trucks in those advertisements. So the other part is, well, maybe in some of that demographic. The other part, if I say 25 to 38-year-old women, now if we can get more color, more information about the target that you're trying to go for, are they urban? Are they rural? Are they educated? Are they less educated? Those sorts of things. Income would be another thing to think about. Generally speaking, those kinds of details are hard to isolate especially for smaller entrepreneurs. For larger businesses, they'll be able to do the research to figure out who it is that buys their product and obviously be able to target them better. So that's a little bit iterative in terms of you have to keep looking at your target and seeing if it's evolving or changing and reflect that in your marketing as well.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I mean, you see it at a high level with these, Fortune 500 companies. And, I mean, it's kind of, you see it done at the highest level a lot of times. And there's a very big difference between, Main Street and Wall Street. So in terms, if you could put it in the terms of a small entrepreneur, maybe they have a family business, maybe they're trying to do, open a roofing company, or they're trying to do like, plumbing or a trade or something like that. Or maybe they want to be a real estate agent, to start out. How can that work? How do you make that happen for a client that doesn't necessarily have that huge budget?
Well, it's one thing to say, get yourself into their shoes a little bit. So you understand, you can empathize with how they're going to interface with your product or your company, which I would think that most entrepreneurs are kind of doing from the beginning. But do it in a serious, honest, and effective way. Just spend some time and think about honestly. Think about how people are interfacing with your company or your product, et cetera. So that, and as you build your brand, that you're addressing any issues that you might see that relate to your customer. So anything you can do to kind of break down barriers of entry for your target is money well spent.
Yeah.
I mean, in web design, it's like if you don't have the intuitive button, then nobody's going to click it.
Right.
And why would you do that? Make it intuitive, make it fair, make it clear. Another thing is to potentially find like a peer group, so to speak, of your target. So if you know a few people, friendly enough with them and comfortable enough approaching them to kind of pick their brain on your brand, or thoughts they have about your category of product or service.
Sure.
Because you can take both general and broad things and apply them. If generally speaking, for example,
right.
If they say, well, a common problem with the widget that you're selling is X, Y, and Z, I see that in the market everywhere, and that's why I haven't bought from these other guys, but I'll consider you because now you're answering those issues.
Sure.
So you can identify some industry problems, and then you can also say, give them insight into some visuals that you're pulling together, sort of a focus group, a mini focus group, if you will.
Yeah.
To see if they, if you're going to produce a mailer or something, show it to them first, to a key group, just a couple people is plenty, and get any input they have from a professional perspective.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be subjective. It shouldn't be, I don't like that typeface. I don't like the color red. It should be substantial. It should be,
yes,
objectively positioned before you consider it real.
Miro and I were actually just talking about the fact that not all feedback is good feedback. When you solicit feedback from people, what I find is it's forced, and they're just looking for anything to tell you about what's wrong or what, and they may not really even, maybe it wouldn't even be an issue. And then now you have all these other things in the pot that you have to consider when you don't really know what you're doing when you're starting out. So, asking your cousin or somebody like that, what do you think about this or whatever? That's great, but take it with a grain of salt, I think. And
well, I think you have to understand too that if you ask your cousin, your cousin's a great guy, whatever,
right?
But she doesn't understand your audience. She doesn't understand what you do. She doesn't understand your strategy for how you're going to reach your target. Why would you put any faith in what that is telling you?
It's uninformed. It's completely uninformed. And you might as well just be looking at yourself in the mirror and asking yourself.
It's like literally starting from zero with zero.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of this.
Right. Surrounding yourself with people that have done it before, that, maybe they're not multimillionaires, but they are just walking in the same, similar path.
Yeah.
Because everybody has their own little things that they get hung up on. And, even if a person isn't like I say, a multimillionaire, they might have something that you haven't encountered yet. So if you guys group together, a community is always stronger than, just a standalone. And that's not to say to do everything the way that everybody does, I don't think, but it is very, very important to align yourself with like-minded individuals. And just a little segue and a plug for us and for you is, we do have the Facebook group. We have the Boss to Boss Facebook group. So it's important. If you're listening to this and you want to surround yourself with people that are kind of going through similar things, then join the Facebook group, follow us, and listen. That's why we do this podcast. We do this podcast to give you free access to information that can help you grow. And Miro's not here right now, but Miro is always open to having phone calls. I am as well. If somebody wants to contact me, you can always reach out to us. But most importantly, and this is the reason that we have Marcus on the show, is because he is an expert in this field. And I think that this is something that's very, very important to anybody that needs to get a little bit more deep understanding of what they need to do to become successful or just even get started. He's a branding expert. So Marcus, if you want to give your company a plug and kind of tell everybody a little bit about what you do, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that I've got a lot of experience doing branding and graphic design, and I've been doing it for like 25 years now, and it's my passion. I love doing it. I love helping companies develop their branding. So that gets represented in all sorts of tactics. Tactics meaning sales material, websites, whatever it is, advertisements, business cards. It could be the side of a bus, whatever. Mm-hmm. Tactics are not the critical component in terms of what I do, because I will get the execution done that's appropriate for the target or the campaign, whatever it is that my clients need done. Every once in a while, more often than not, somebody comes and says, "Oh, I do need a website," which is usually true. You need a website. I mean, just everybody does. But ultimately, if your idea is, I need to get product in hand for people because they'll never buy it unless they use it first, well, then a website is not the answer.
Right.
It's some sort of packaging vehicle now that we have to think about. We need to get your product so it's interesting and enticing and relevant, so customers will potentially pick it up. So just coming and assuming that I need this tactic is not always correct. So I'll always, like in that gathering process, I'll learn to understand better what their objective is to make sure that tactic that they're asking me to create for them is actually appropriate. Because, like I said, it might not be, it might be, but it might not be. So I'll work through that with them as well.
And I know from experience, I mean, when we were working together, coming up with ideas for the logo, you were super open. A lot of people that I've worked with before, they're just like, no, this is just the way, like, take it or leave it, and that's, I respect that. And that's why it's something that I know will be very beneficial to anybody that does reach out to Marcus, because of the fact that in my own experience, we were able to communicate in a way that, got us to the destination that we were looking to get to. We wanted the logo, he was easy to work with, and, that's why he won. Because the other entries, people that, we communicated with, maybe they were difficult, maybe, they had some skill, but they wanted to do it their way. But, in their way, sometimes you just get stuck in a rut. And if you don't communicate with your client, you're not doing the job, So the branding experts are a dime a dozen. And I talk to people, everybody says they're a branding expert. Everybody says they know the way, but the talk is not as important as the walk. And Marcus definitely has shown that he's the real deal, guys. So yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I wanted to have you on. And for anybody that wanted to check out a little bit more about Marcus, go to normandesign.co. That's normandesign.co.
Yes.
You can find a little bit more information about, the guy on the screen right now, and, a little bit more information on his process and some of the services that he offers.
Thanks for, you're a better salesman than I am. Thank you, Steve. You can see it doesn't come naturally to me. My strong point. Marcus at normandesign.co. If you want to email me, that'd be great too.
What's the email?
Marcus, Marcus, at normandesign.co.
Excellent. And so, the big unveil, reveal, I guess, that we have is we are going to offer, if you like what you heard today and you want to reach out to Marcus, Marcus was willing to offer a $60 30-minute branding consultation.
I would love to help anybody. Given some of what I've said, I think it gives you a little bit of ground to kind of put some background thinking toward things, which could give us a step ahead as well. But if you have a specific problem, I can help you figure that out. Or if you have just a general, I don't know what I'm doing and I need some a kickstart, I can do that as well.
Just help me. Yeah, anything. I don't know where to start.
It's like if you're looking for a resource to do whatever it is, animation, then I can help you find that as well.
Yeah.
So
connecting. If he can't do it himself, he'll connect you to people that he trusts and has worked with in the past to get it done for you.
Exactly.
The bottom line is for $60, you will have access to a specialist in the field that, focuses on these things every day. You have a 30-minute consultation where he'll cover the identity of your company personality, like we laid out before. He'll, help you to identify the target audience. And then the most important part of this offer that he has, $60 is a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's ridiculous. But the most important thing is he'll leave you with an action plan. So the action plan, that is going to kind of encompass all the things that we talked about before, where, he's going to kind of help you identify who you are as a company, your target audience, but then most importantly, how to implement that in your actual business. And it's a no obligation thing, it's just a conversation.
No obligation. I don't work like that at all. If it led to, say, a project, then we talk about that completely separately. Right. No bearing and no expectation on my part at all.
Yeah.
In terms of future projects.
And that's refreshing. A lot of times people kind of have that, okay, well, we talked about it, so what are we doing? And then, this is not that. And
you and I talked about this, not in that spirit at all. This is just if people want like a 30-minute consult to take an outside perspective, to get an outside perspective from somebody who has done a little bit of this, then they can talk to me, and this gives them an opportunity that maybe they don't have otherwise. So
yeah. I mean, just talking to somebody that really has experience doing this at a high level is worth not just $60 bucks. It's ridiculous. It's worth the world. It's worth your business, because if you don't do these things first, then you don't have a business. You're not going to make that money. So, just take it from me. We've dealt with Marcus before. You obviously have seen it for yourself that he knows what he's talking about. We could talk for hours about this stuff. I mean, and we probably will touch again on a lot of this stuff, maybe together. But Marcus is going to be on the podcast with a full interview with Miro to kind of dig into the things that Miro talks about with interviewees. So look out for that. I'm definitely excited. I'm sure you are too. And we will put a link on the website so you can directly contact Marcus and get this offer that he's so generously given to us. Awesome. And so I definitely appreciate the time, Marcus. Is there any other closing thoughts that you had that you wanted to maybe get across before we end this thing?
No, I mean, just to say, it was a pleasure working with you guys on your identity and the logo that is coming to life, which is great. And I'm just thrilled you're happy with it. And, anytime I can kind of help a company build an image that brings them success, that's what I'm after.
That is all for this episode of Boss to Boss. Your next step is to visit bosstoboss.com, where you will find proven techniques followed by professionals to help you make that next step. Again, that is boss2boss.com. And remember, the time is now.